Okay. And with that in mind, let's start. So welcome to the 2021 May and September CFE online workshop. The purpose of this video is to really explain how to prepare for the May or September 2021 CFE, which is the final exam in the Canadian CPA process. What I'm going to talk a lot about today is basically some of the basics around how the CFE is structured, how it's a very different exam than what you might have done before, and what you're basically supposed to do, okay? A quick disclaimer, feel free to read that in your own spare time. So this is me. My name is Mike Katsevman. I'm the course director at PrepFormula. I've been involved with the marking process for about 5 years now. Previous to that, I had a career as a practitioner. So I was an auditor for about 6.5 years. I also taught at York University's Atkinson program, and had a lot of experience in general. Why PrepFormula? We provide a supplementary personalized training program for students going through CPA Prep. And that includes the CFE. Had a really high success rate for everything that we've done so far. And we are proudly Canada's largest CPA Prep program based on site traffic for the 5th year straight. So just some more information there. So let me first kind of get started with a quick introduction of the overall process. And maybe it's actually kind of helpful for me to start with Capstone 1, because Capstone 1 is something that's generally required by most candidates. And I mean that by most candidates because depending on what background you come from, for example, there are some exceptions. If you are an internationally trained accountant, for example, from India, you get to skip Capstone 1, or it's technically optional to skip. You could still enroll in Capstone 1, and there's a whole bunch of information that we can talk about. Like there's a whole bunch of ideas around should you skip, should you not skip, should you buy the materials, etc. So those situations are a lot more complicated, but now I'm digressing. So the idea is, generally speaking, most candidates in the process, right? So there's about, 7,000, 10,000 writers, okay? Most of them will go through Capstone 1, and then we'll go through Capstone 2. What I want to talk about today is, at least to start off, is what is Capstone 1, what is Capstone 2, and just kind of walk through some key dates so you have all this stuff planned in your schedule. So first and foremost, for any of you that come from the regular route, which is the CPA Prep route. So for example, if you start at the Core 1 exam, which is the first exam, in the process, and then you move to Core 2, to the electives, etc. Capstone 1 will be the first capstone module, which is very different than what you might be used to previously. And it's remarkably different than what you actually have done before. And I'll explain why. So generally speaking, there are some key differences between how Capstone 1 is run and what it really is, that I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page around what has to be done, just so you don't do too much work. Now, Capstone 1 is really a very large group project. It's a group project with a presentation. No other module previous to this module focuses on being a group project or being an oral presentation. So what's bizarre about this whole concept is we're not really looking for any kind of technical competence here, because you are, and when you aren't. What I mean by that is you get a chance to work in a group of approximately 5 candidates and you have to do 3 things. You have to submit your group submissions, which basically is in preparation for the final report. It's kind of like submitting chunks of your report ahead of time. The first week will be like a rough overview and the whole introduction. The second submission is going to be something like, providing all your quants, and then the last one is sort of all the write-up before you actually present. So what that really is multiple checkpoints to determine whether you meet the standard or not. And then at each checkpoint, someone tells you, hey, fix that, fix this, adjust that, etc. And then finally, you actually end up submitting the report. Now, if you think about 7-8 weeks, this is a lot of work that you do together as a group of 5 people. And if you think about what that is, there's no final exam. There's just basically a presentation along with this report. And you get to answer some questions from a panel. The panel is a bunch of CPAs. They have other materials that don't look like yours. They basically have scripted questions that they can ask you. These scripted questions allow them to ask you any questions they want, plus the ones that are scripted. You see? So the intent of, the panel is to try to throw you off and to try to ask you a question that might be really difficult. Now, if you just jump back here for a second, and you might be sitting here listening to this and saying, this sounds more like a high school project. This sounds like I'm in, grade 12, and I'm working in a group together, and I'm preparing some sort of a presentation, or it might sound like, university. And in my opinion, that's kind of what this step is. It's a bizarre part of the process because it doesn't really connect to anything other than CFE day 1. But even when it connects to the CFE day 1, you're really only using the facts of the case and not the presentation style, not the reporting style, and nothing to do with the actual oral presentation. So the most bizarre thing about Capstone 1 is it's kind of a necessary step. So you have to do it for those of you that are forced into it. For those of you that are not forced into it, you don't have to. And in fact, I actually don't recommend it if you can opt out of it. And as you can see, this doesn't really help you with the CFE preparation. So ultimately, the most difficult part of the process becomes the CFE, the final exam, the 3-day long case writing exam. Capstone 1, not, in my opinion, a priority, not something that you should really be focusing a lot of time on. And we have a lot of resources later that where we try to talk about some of the ideas around how to minimize the time that you spend within Capstone 1 so you can actually picture yourself focusing on the CFE, which is sort of the final exam and really the most important part of the process, you see? Because if you waste too much time, then you're going to burn time doing a group presentation instead of actually preparing for the case writing process, you see? And that becomes a problem. Anyway, so depending on whether you're writing the May or the September CFE, there are different dates for when you would enroll in this. Now, please understand that you have to do this sequentially, generally speaking. So meaning if you're writing the May exam, then you have to do it in January. If you're writing the September, then you're doing the May Capstone 1 attempt. So a lot of people kind of say, hey, can I do it in January and then write the September exam? There are some complications around that because the cases change. So I actually don't recommend that. And that's not something that I would advise you to do. So generally speaking, please write the Capstone 1 attempt closest with the actual CFE preparation. And just to explain, so if you take a look at some of these timelines, in January we're ready start, right? We are ready start with the Capstone 1 process. That means if you're preparing for the CFE, and let's say that you're just starting out, let's say you know nothing about the process. Let's say that you've just tuned in to this video and you're saying to yourself, wow, okay, I want to write the CFE. I want to do this exam. I want to take a look at, I want to know what's required, and I know absolutely nothing. If you know absolutely nothing, please understand that whatever date it is today, you have to know the materials before January 23rd. Because by the time that you're in Capstone 1, things are going to move very quickly. So you see, The date as of today is September 29th, 2020. So what that really gives you is approximately a little more than 3 months to prepare for this process. So that's the point that I want to drive home here. This is what I want to convey, that you have limited time to actually prepare the overall technical review before you actually get kind of, stuck in this whole CPA world, and then you're doing the Capstone 1, et cetera. So I often get people that are like, hey, you know what? I'll just kind of delay this. I'll just defer this. I'm busy at work. I've got life commitments, this and that. You really want to plan backwards, right? So you really want to say to yourself, okay, what CFE am I running? Am I writing? Is it the May CFE? Okay, well, in that case, then that looks like I have to start studying some of the technical around now, like October, November, December will be my technical review on a couple weekends in a library, etc. Right? And if you're doing September, then again, it's probably 3 months from that. So now we're talking like January, February is probably your start date. You see? So you always want to plan back. You always want to think about what some of the key dates are, just so you're not really scrambling when you're entering into Capstone 1. So again, just as a quick recap, Capstone 1, not super useful, but does tie into the CFE Day 1 case. I'll explain what that is in a second. If you get a chance to skip it, skip it. And then immediately after, you jump into Capstone 2. So, by the way, between Capstone 1 and Capstone 2, you get a break, okay? You will get approximately 15 days where you don't have anything. So, Capstone 1 will finish, Capstone 2 won't start yet, so you're going to have about 2 weeks. In that period, we always run a CFE Live session. CFE Live is PrepFormula's version of kind of a preparation program that's run live. It's kind of like this particular webinar. It's very similar to what you might find as part of this whole process of what you're doing here, tuning into a video like this. But the way that this would work is you would basically get access to some in-depth CFE content that we like to share before you get started in Capstone 2. Your attendance is mandatory from a PrepFormula perspective. We really recommend it. If you're not able to attend live, then you can totally watch a replay. We always allow you, okay? We always allow you to attend and watch the stuff live later on. So don't worry about not, being able to make the live sessions. But my whole point is mandatory being that you need to make sure that you find the time to watch the sessions. Okay, very good. So let's now get into Capstone 2. Capstone 2 is a little more useful, definitely a lot more useful compared to doing the Capstone 1 process. Capstone 2 is useful because it actually prepares you for case writing for the CFE. Now, please note, Capstone 2 has no exam. It has no, you can't really fail Capstone 2. If you're meeting all the submissions, if you're actually doing the work, you can't really fail it. Same goes, by the way, for Capstone 1. It's pretty difficult to fail Capstone 1 because it's not an evaluation, really. It's more of a group project, as I mentioned. Again, if you don't submit anything and you completely just, negligently not care about your preparation for it, yeah, of course you can fail anything. But it's extremely difficult to fail in terms of it being really, structured in a way that it's much more encouraging. So it's not really critical in that type of a capacity. Anyway, okay. Moving back to Capstone 2. Capstone 2 starts off with a workshop, and then you basically get assigned a whole bunch of voluntary cases. So CPA Canada uses previous exam questions from mostly the UFI. There's a sprinkling of CFE cases, but it's mostly the UFI. And the UFI, by the way, is the predecessor exam that was run before 2015. So the accounting bodies prior to the merger in 2015 predominantly I guess, well, not predominantly, but they all had their own different examination processes. For example, Capstone 1 came from the CMA world. It actually had nothing to do with the old exam process and did not exist under this, the old UFI process. Now, I'm dating myself because I was actually a UFI marker prior to being a CFE marker. The UFI was very similar to the CFE, and in my opinion, it most closely resembles the CFE today compared to all of the other three or the other two. But like amongst the three examination processes, the UFI was definitely the closest to the CFE. As I mentioned, CPA Canada takes a bunch of those UFI questions. They've updated them. They've changed the rates. They've added a couple of different sections into them. And they basically provide these cases to you. Now, if you are one of those students that gets to skip again, okay, so as I mentioned, or for example, let's say that you are a rewriter and you took, 1 or 2 years off and you're kind of, behind and you're not 100% sure of your, materials, technical competence, etc. My suggestion is there is something called an NFC, a not-for-credit option of Capstone 2, and you can actually just buy the materials alone from CPA Canada. Now, the only problem with buying the materials, again, everything is an exception in life. The only problem with buying the materials is that they're only really available right before Capstone 2. So you can't buy them like earlier. You can't buy them ahead of time. Again, that's why you would use PrepFormula, our resources, our classes, our cases, everything like that prior to this whole process. And then basically right before March and July, you would get access to the actual CPA resources, and then you would immediately transition to those. You see? So what you would want to do is use the PrepFormula resources now, all of our cases, all our methodologies, just so you can fill up your time, so you can teach yourself some of the, the technical rules, some of the case writing, etc. And then eventually you would supplement with the Capstone 2 materials under the NFC option. Now, assuming that you have to take Capstone 2, and NFC then at that point doesn't really matter. You're going to have to do it anyway. Okay, so there's no other way for you to do it if you're, I guess there's no other way basically. Okay, so if you're forced into that NFC option, then, I guess if you're forced into Capstone 2, then you just have to do it. Anyway, my whole point behind all of this, and something that you should just sort of consider here, is when you're starting off with this whole process, again, as I mentioned, it's a workshop, and then you've got these voluntary cases and all that good stuff. This particular module is kind of funny because a lot of it sort of is up to you, what you do with it, how you spend the time, what you end up doing with your time provided. In my opinion, I think a lot of people definitely take the time to review stuff and are very comfortable with what they're doing, etc. And then there's others that I find that sort of don't do the work and all that. So if I find that if you do the work, then you will do really well in this whole module, and you will have absolutely no problem whatsoever to go through the whole process and to kind of go end to end and sort of complete it. Okay. Anyway, with that in mind, so here are some key dates. Please write them down, or please download this, attachment. Like, I will make this slide deck available for you after, and you'll be able to download this, and you'll be able to write down all the dates and kind of keep them. Okay. So yeah, again, depending on which one you write, which CFE you write, you would either start in April or you would start in July. So it's kind of great. Now let's talk about the overall CFE process for 2021. I mean, I can't believe it. It's September. It's late September, basically, right? We are entering into like the final quarter of the year. Like, it's incredible how fast this year went by and how unusual it was because of all the COVID stuff. Anyway, so the CFE really is a 3-day case-based exam. CFE generally does not test provincial tax laws, or generally also doesn't really have things like HST or GST. It's very much high level federal type, information amongst the 6 competency areas. You're never given a mark. You're never given like a score, like a final grade. All you basically do as part of the process is you go through the whole process, and you write a bunch of cases on different days. And I'll walk you through what these, are, and I'll walk through some of the changes. Now, please note that on this slide, you see, there's a point here that says candidates are expected to use their laptops and write within a software called Surpass. This is no longer, because of COVID, they've changed the process pretty dramatically. So, and I'm not sure as of September, 2020, I cannot predict what's going to happen. So technically this was the process, not in 2020, but this was the process previous to the, to this exam that just went on. But the process did change pretty significantly. Each writer basically had their own hotel room this year. They were using CPA Canada laptops. There was no Surpass. There were a number of different changes. Those are not important. I will cover them later in future webinars as more information becomes available. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not material to your overall preparation. Okay. And please, at the bottom of your screen now, you will see the key dates, May 26th to 28, 2021, or September 13th to 15. If you plan on writing one of these exams, please put this in your calendar right now. So please block out any weddings, any, attendance of, unexpected family trips, vacations. Do not book anything around these dates. You could book something after, and maybe that's something that you can actually think about booking, and maybe that's actually a really good idea. But try not to book anything before that, right? So it's always advisable to kind of start thinking about something like that. Anyway, so the CFE really is 3 days in length. There are 3 separate distinct days. Imagine that it's like 3 different worlds that you have to, be a master of. The first day is something called CFE Day 1, and we're going to cover that in a little bit more detail, but basically it is an extension of the Capstone 1 case. Now, please keep in mind, the CFE Day 1 is only 4 hours in length. Okay, Day 1 is only 4 hours in length. And if you think about it, if you wrote the Capstone 1 and you've, again, just listen to what I just said about Capstone 1 and my feelings towards it, and the fact that you spend 7 to 8 weeks preparing, it is impossible to write a really thorough response in 4 hours for something that you did in a group of 5 people for 8 weeks. Okay, so to me, those two things are not comparable. And really, if you actually look at the, what they call the extension cases, they're dramatically different. There's a different writing style, and there's actually a separate class that we run to explain the whole approach behind Capstone 1 and the whole approach behind CFE Day 1. Okay, so we do have a CFE Day 1 marker in the program, and that's something that we, basically focus on very significantly as a program later. So don't worry about it for now. Day 2 is a 5-hour giant case. It has 2 components. It has a shared component between all different candidates. So let's say among the 8,000 writers that are writing, the numbers are different every year, so they haven't really been announced this year, but let's say it's about 8,000. So it will be the same common rule amongst the 8,000. And then there's going to be another part of it, like another half of the exam for Day 2, still the same day, that will be on a roll. And you have to pick one of 4 roles. And the roles, by the way, are the same choices as the electives, right? So audit being the most chosen role, the most common role. Then performance management is probably the second most common chosen role. And then you've got tax and finance that are basically not taken by anybody. It's extremely rare to see people take finance or tax. So those are the rules. So basically half the exam is shared. It will be financial reporting, basically accounting and management accounting focus. And then the other part will be this role. So either finance or tax or management accounting, like basically performance management, or assurance, okay, which is like an audit role. And then day 3, to me, day 3 is the most difficult day. It's 3 short cases ranging anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes length each. It's 3 separate cases, have nothing to do with one another. These are actually very similar to the elective cases. So that's really what they are. They're probably the closest to that. But except there's much more topic coverage. So unlike the electives, which are only generally on one area, these potentially could be cases from any competency area, any of the 6 competency areas. So it's kind of like doing case from a different elective than what you're used to. That's pretty difficult. So we'll talk about that too. So that's really the process. Again, so without getting too much into CFE Day 1, and feel free to look at the slide later, but really the purpose of the CFE Day 1 is to be an extension and to use something called enabling competencies. So Day 1 is not generally a technical day, although there are definitely technical components to Day 1. It's considered a non-technical day because of the integration of the enabling competencies. And again, we're going to talk a lot about that. Day 2, I've basically covered, right? Same case, different roles. A couple things that I just wanted to point out here. Your scores from Day 2 are weighted more heavily compared to Day 3. So Day 1 is marked separately, okay? It's really 2 separate exams in one, the CFE. Day 1 is marked separately, and days 2 and 3 together are marked separately. Of the days 2 and 3, Day 2 is marked a little bit more and weighted a little bit more than Day 3. Okay, like we're talking like closer to 60-40, not like 80-20 here. Okay, so just to let you know, the marks are definitely weighted a little bit more on CFE Day 2. And the reason for that is really because you have the financial reporting and management accounting AOs, which are depth opportunities compared to breadth opportunities, which, by the way, I'm probably saying gibberish to all of you if you don't understand what depth or breadth means. But in a nutshell, basically, that's all you really need to know at this point. That's probably the easiest way. And please sort of tune into some of my future, resources where I describe some of this, because I feel like you'll definitely get a lot more out of the process once you, kind of get started. Kind of more and more here. Okay. And then last but not least, again, Day 3, kind of like these elective cases. Biggest challenge on Day 3 in my experience, and I don't know if we have any other people, I guess, watching. I don't know what your experience sort of has been like, but time management is a huge problem for a lot of candidates on this exam. And it's exactly time management that is probably the most difficult part of this exam, the Day 3 portion. So it is certainly something that, you can take a look at and you can try to do better in. And I really would advise you to practice lots and lots of cases. Now, how do you actually, do well? Here's my tips on how to go through this whole process. There's a couple of little things, like little tricks. And we go through a lot of this in very significant detail in the program, but I just want to kind of give you some high-level points. These are some of the bigger problems that I often see. The first thing that I want to say is please add conclusions everywhere. So I often find that whenever I'm marking, question papers, a lot of folks feel like this whole part of the process, the exam process, is more about just, doing a lot of number crunching and doing a lot of analysis. So I think a lot of people are very comfortable with the analysis, but a lot of people, for some reason, are scared of providing a conclusion. It's kind of like saying, okay, so I've calculated all this stuff. Now the question is, now what? You know what I mean? Like, where do we go from here? So this is sort of what I want you to always think about, because the conclusions will always really help the marketer understand that you know the topic well enough. Okay? So that's the other thing. The second point that I want to point out here is you always want to focus on case writing as a process. And what I mean by that is you should have a method for how you approach case writing. So case writing should never be just simply you writing a whole bunch of things on a piece of paper with no real, uniformity between cases. So, for example, if you're reinventing the wheel and you're writing cases differently for each case that you write, you're going to really struggle with this exam. So we teach a process for case writing called RODAC. This is the PrepFormula writing system. It basically is a computer outline method where you build a skeleton response of your answer before you actually answer. Now, if you don't have any kind of a plan, you're going to struggle a lot. And the point of having a plan is, in my opinion, you will be a lot more better prepared, and you'll be able to use some sort of a unique framework that will apply consistently to all questions. Number 3, please attempt everything. Okay. I cannot stress this one enough. For some reason, there are people out there that have this understanding, and it's a false understanding. It's an incorrect understanding that you're allowed to skip like 1 or 2 AOs. Okay. And by the way, for those of you that don't know what an AO is, it's like a section on the exam. You are not allowed to skip anything. So if you leave any part of the exam blank, you are getting closer and closer to an automatic fail, in my opinion and in my experience. So please attempt everything. Even if you attempt it for 30 seconds, it's better than not having anything at all. So that's really one of the biggest problems that I see, and it's kind of brings all the stuff to a close. Now, kind of a couple of other things. In general, I run other classes like this where I talk about other exam strategy. So, for example, you can have exam strategy where you look at the previous exam topics. I try to provide that. Now, there's no way that you can memorize every technical topic. I find a lot of people also try to do that. They commit themselves to memorizing every single imaginable technical topic. If this sounds like you, please try not to do this, because what you will find is you will really struggle with the whole process. You will, find yourself really scrambling. So try not to memorize everything. Instead, go through previous exam cases and previous exam questions or topics, because those are much more likely to reappear. And then the other small thing that I just wanted to say is these are standardized exams designed with a time constraint. There's absolutely no possibility for you to do everything in the right, timeline. So you always want to do whatever you can in the time provided. And then the rules of the game, here's the overall pass guide. I'm going to just explain this a little bit more and just walk you through the main differences. Now, for those of you coming in through CPA PEP, if you've done the PEP modules, Core 1, Core 2, and the electives, you're probably really familiar with levels 2, 3, and 4. Now, let me explain what they are. So levels 2 and 3 look at depth roles. So depth roles means, let's say that you have an exam and there are 5 opportunities. There's 5 sections across the different cases that deal with financial accounting or financial reporting subjects. Out of those 5, let's say you need to score 3 of 5 at a C level, at a competent level, meaning generally reasonably correct. Let's say 3 out of 5 at a C level, meaning that it's appropriate, you pass, okay? That's your depth level. It might be 4 out of 5. You kind of get it. It's never really a 5 out of 5, just for the record. Okay, and then breadth is kind of like a lower level. There might be only 1 opportunity that you need to score in, and these are the other competency areas. Now, most people at the PEP level understand levels 2, 3, and 4, depth, breadth, etc. What you don't really understand until you hit the CFE is level 1, which is called sufficiency. And it's kind of written in a really weird way. I find the CFE reports, which, by the way, is something that you should look at. They're freely available on the internet, on the CPA Canada website. CFE reports basically are the previous exam creators, which are the board of examiners at CPA Canada. It's a committee. They release a report with their own comments about the CFE. There's a lot of really good information in there. But I find like level 1 is very weirdly described. And really all it is, and it's a new addition, and new being like it wasn't tested on PEP. It's something new for the CFE. Basically, you have to look at the average of all the different AOs, all the different sections of the case, and you have to make sure that you do well in all these areas. On average, okay? So your average mark actually becomes really critical and really important, and that's really the whole purpose of doing this whole process. So that's really what you do as part of this process. Now, the average basically now allows you to see if you can discuss things at a sufficient level, meaning kind of what is your performance like compared to other candidates in the process on average. That's what level 1 is. And by the way, just to let you know, level 1, in my experience, it accounts for about 70% of people failing the CFE. So 7 out of 10 people will fail the CFE. Of those that fail on level 1. So definitely a lot of food for thought. Now, basics of case writing. I'm going to cover a bunch of other topics that I think you should sort of think about in general. Hopefully this is helpful, for you. A couple of little things that I often find is, case writing is like entering a parallel universe and not, thinking about other areas. So when you are in exam mode, let's say that you are writing stuff and you're participating in real life, you should not be thinking about the exam. When you are in exam mode, you should not be thinking or connecting, real life to it. So please don't ever apply industry knowledge. Let's say that you're an expert in construction and you get a case that has some sort of a construction company on it. Please only use the facts available to you in the actual case. Do not go above and beyond and say, I used to audit this client. Oh, I have an experience in construction. No. Focus on the case facts, okay? The other thing is case writing becomes an art. It's something that you get better at over time. So if you practice, by writing lots of cases, like basically, you will never be good at case writing naturally. It's not a thing in my, at least in my experience. It's something that you kind of get better at. Number 3, when I write cases, I try to keep my surroundings the same all the time. Like, let's say I drink a certain kind of coffee. I always, for example, write cases with earplugs. Some people find it helpful. Some people cannot write with earplugs. I am a earplugs writer. Okay. I don't know. It's just, it really helps me understand and, zone out from all the distractions. So when you're writing practice cases, please drink the same coffee if you drink coffee or tea or whatever, whatever you consume. Plus, let's say earplugs but simulate the whole time, right? Simulate with each attempt. The other thing is, it's always nice to have a study partner that you can discuss and, walk through case ideas. In your debrief, let's say that you're taking up the answer, you might be able to teach, another student about how you approach something. Now, if you're looking for a study partner, we have a forum on the PrepFormula website. It's free. You can create a free account. You can leave a message in there saying, I'm looking for a study partner. I'm writing the May or the September 2021 CFE. Let's do a Zoom call and discuss more. I highly recommend it, folks. The other question that I often get is, how do I read faster? Because, this is a time, based exam. So naturally, I want to read faster. So here's sort of what I do. I try to kind of, do this. So first of all, I try not to pronounce each word as I'm reading. I look at the general sentence. I often also skim the case, and just orient myself. So I'll kind of flip through the case and find where the exhibits are, so I kind of know what they are. Maybe I'll read the title. I won't read ahead, but I find it helpful. The other thing that I watch out for when I'm doing case writing in general is I try to identify what my role is. So, for example, it's something really important from a case writing perspective. Understand your role. So like, are you an auditor? Are you an industry professional? Are you, a committee member? There could be so many different types of roles. So it depends on, the type, I guess, depending on whatever type of role you are presented with, you should always try to use that role and then change some of the, I guess, pronouns and general buzzwords in the case from like, please do this or whatever. Like, make sure that you fit the role. And again, when I'm reading, I try to avoid like the if, is, and whatever. And last but not least, I like to highlight numbers. You'll see that in other areas. And let's say that you are writing cases, and you were struggling, or let's say that you've tried to write a case for the first time and you really kind of are falling behind and you don't really know what you're doing. Here's how I would write a case. So assuming that it's a short case, one of those 60 to 90 minute cases, I often start with the actual duration of the case. So for example, in this case, it'll be, 80 minutes. Okay. I attempt, to do it. After I read it and after I attempt it for the first time, by the way, you should always attempt it. Okay. I often get people that say to me, hey, should I learn technical before? Like, should I learn the materials before I attempt cases? And honestly, you don't really need to do that. You could just do a whole bunch of cases and then take them up, and that will really help you do better. So that's kind of what I do. Read, attempt the case, look at the solution guide, reread the case again after, attempt it, fix all your problem areas, look at the solution guide again, and then third time you might be able to write the case again by trimming each area. So each case can actually be written multiple times for the CFE if you're struggling with the case writing process. So don't let it always be just something that you're just jumping into. And then for your overall study plan. So we do a lot of updates throughout the year. First of all, there's going to be some new technical materials that will be uploaded for 2021, including competency map topics. There's also the live and recorded classes that are run twice every single week. Please also note that you have credits for one-on-one sessions and case marking services. That's part of the package as well. We tend to customize a schedule and release a couple of schedules later on in the process, so you will definitely find them shortly. And there's those boot camp sessions, so definitely go through the process. And if for whatever reason you're not through the first time and you're in the Prep Plus program and you've gone through the PrepFormula program, before, we're behind you 100% of the way. So we've basically offered a pass guarantee since our inception of the program. So please do reach out. We'd be happy to help you. And a couple of small technical updates. Just wanted to mention a couple of them. You probably know most of them, but for 2021, there's definitely going to be more of a focus on IFRS 9, IFRS 15, and IFRS 16. Those are the bigger changes. And from a tax perspective, what you will definitely find is some of the government assistance programs. So like your CERBs and all that stuff. It was obviously not examinable in 2020 because that's when it sort of came out, but I anticipate that it will be on the exam in 2021, I guess on an ongoing basis. So you really want to review some of those programs. Okay, so that's all you need to know. So let's get started. If you have any questions at all about any of the resources that we offer, please please do reach out. I'd like to leave my contact information just so you have it readily available. And I think that's basically that. So let me just, I'll just say thank you for attending. If you'd like to reach me, if you'd like a custom study plan, if you'd like advice, please feel free to reach out. I don't bite. Here's my email address, and I'll make a copy of today's presentation available on the site, on the PrepFormula site, under recording. I guess it'll be under recorded classes, and then under recording under today's date, which is September 29th, 2020. And then if you'd like the slide deck, it'll be made available under webinar materials. Okay. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending, and I hope to see you all soon in the PrepFormula program. Okay, let me also see if you've got any questions. So if you've got any questions here at all, please do let me know. So now is a good time for you to ask any questions that you may have. And if you have no questions at all, that's great too. But at this time, I am open to your questions. Okay, let me just see if there's anybody else. Yeah, feel free to communicate with me through the chat again. That's the best way to, reach me and kind of go through the whole process. So let me just see if there's any questions. And if not, we'll disconnect for the evening. So let me just see if anyone has any questions at all. Yeah, okay, great. So I don't see any questions. Yeah, I don't see any questions. Again, if you have any further questions, you're absolutely welcome to reach me. Oh yeah, so there's a question. Hey Mike, is the CFE 21 study guide available? Nope, it's not available yet. It'll be available in December. So it'll be available in December after we get some of the tax updates. So what the government does, just to explain, the government always has a process for how tax updates are done. So just, that's really the whole part of the process here. Okay, so it'll be available likely in approximately December. However, you probably shouldn't expect a lot of changes. So just to let you know, there's really no other changes per se. Because of COVID, there's really not that many changes that are actually hitting this year at this time. Any other questions? Anything at all? Otherwise, we'll disconnect for the evening. Okay, folks. Perfect. Thank you so much for attending. Hopefully you found the session useful. If you, what I would like to ask for you to do is just to leave me a review. So if you've enjoyed this, at the end of all this, please leave a review. And, let me know what your thoughts were about the session, and we can go from there. Okay. Thank you again. And, hope you all have a wonderful day. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending an hour with me, and, we'll go from there. Okay. Thanks again, and hope you all